I'm going to show you how you can quickly deploy a Spring Boot Angular app in the cloud with all the best practices included. To deploy these two services, we will use a VM or a VPS. On my side, I will use a VM from Azure because they have a free tier when you create a new account. On top of that, we will install Coolify, which is an open source platform as a service that is completely free. A platform as a service is a platform that helps us to create, run, and manage applications with ease through a nice UI. Their goal is to be efficient, secure, and quick. Like this, we don't have to configure everything by hand. So to begin, we will configure the backend and the frontend of the Airbnb project that I made in a previous video. The link is in the description. So I invite you to clone this project on your computer. Like this, you can follow this tutorial. The idea here is to deploy a real-world application. Then we will set up the VM with Coolify and configure the project inside the platform as a service to make the deployment happen. To finish, we will explore how we can automate the deployment of the backend with Github Action. Alright, so we are going to start by configuring our backend. The first step for us will be to configure our Docker image. So to do so, we will use Paketo build pack. There is many other tools that we can use, like Jib, for example, but I think for me it's the best and the quicker because it's already integrated with Spring Boot. So what Paketo build pack is doing is transform your application source code into container image. Of course, it has some downside because it's very opinionated, meaning that you have like minimal configuration to do. So if you want like a lot of freedom on the way of your configuring your container, then maybe Paketo build pack is not for you. But I think it's a very good way to start because you will have a very nice and well configured image without much configuration and knowledge. So let's open our pom.xml and let's go to the Spring Boot Maven plugin. Here we are going to put a configuration markup with an image. Let's close this configuration markup. Then we will have a name. It will be the name of the image. So on my side, it would be Merlin of Chaos like this. And the name will be Airbnb-clone-backend. And we will input the project version. This is a Maven variable, and that's the project version, which is here. So I will just put like, I will just remove the snapshot. It would be 0.0.1. And we do this because like this, when you increment this version, it will automatically tag appropriately the Docker image. So the name is also a way for Docker to know where it needs to push the image. We will need a Docker registry somewhere. So on my side, I will use the Docker Hub. It's completely free. You can create a new account. Then you can create here a new repository. You can name it the way you want, but the way you name it will affect here the name because it needs to be the same. So on my side, it's Airbnb clone backend. And that's why I have a repository which is named the same as this one. Okay. You can even like here copy paste. And so I pushed already to make sure it's working, but we will do it just after. Okay. Now let's come back here and let's open a terminal. First we just need a bit of more configuration. Let's add some environment variable. We will add bp-jvm version and we will put 21.0.3. Also, we will do like bp-jvm cds enable to true. Those two variables are coming from build pack. But what you need to understand about build pack is that there is many build pack that will be involved in the process of building the Docker image. So, of course, this one, you can understand that it's to specify the JVM version. And this one is a bit more complicated. It's CDS it's a special feature of the JDK9, which is like class data sharing, and that's some kind of optimization this build tool is realizing for us, meaning that it will preload some class data about our application, and when we will run it in production, this cache will make the run faster. So basically, we are like earning maybe 50% in terms of the time that the application takes to start. So if you want to find, for example, the environment variable about Spring Boot, you can directly go here and you can find how this build pack is behaving, and you can find everything that you can configure here as well. So that's just for the Spring Boot part. But if you want to find more about all the build pack that can be involved inside the build, on this page, you will have specific env variable where you can specify a lot of stuff. So for example, the JVM version as we did, like the JVM type, and a lot of stuff. Now that we have our Docker image configured properly, we can come back to the code and make some change on our app. The first thing that we need to do is to configure CORS. So what is CORS? CORS means cross-origin resource sharing. Basically, it's a security mechanism where a server will add some header on a HTTP response, and it will tell the browser of the user what is the domain that the browser can call this server. If it doesn't match, the browser will automatically block the HTTP call. Okay, so we need that because basically the backend will not be hosted at the same domain name than our frontend. So we need to configure this mechanism. How to do that with Spring Boot? We are going to add a class in, so let's say main Java infrastructure, and we will add here a class named CORS filter configuration, annotated configuration with a private CORS configuration variable. So CORS configuration. Let's add the constructor. Let's create a bin of type filter registration bin of type CORS filter. Let's import this one, CORS filter. We will call it simple CORS filter. We will annotate it with at bin and with at order, with the ordered highest precedence, because we want that this filter will and this bin will be initialized as soon as possible. So it's filter registration bin. Sorry for that. That's why there was an error. So first we will need a URL-based CORS configuration source of this type, and we will have the source here exactly like this. Then after the source.register CORS configuration, I will need to instantiate the bin filter registration bin. So like this, so a new filter registration bin, and with inside the CORS filter that we will need with the source. Here, the source, I'll specify the pattern that I want to protect with CORS. So in our case, it's all the URL. The CORS configuration object, we will see it in a minute, but that's just a plain POJO. And the CORS filter is the Spring object that Spring will use to filter the different requests. So then let's put the bin on the highest precedent order. And why do we do that? It's because if you don't do that, Spring Security will intercept first the request and will send, for example, a 4.1. And then the browser will block the request because the CORS will not be inside. So that's not good. That's why we want that this filter will be the first one to be hit by the HTTP request and not Spring Security. Then let's return the bin. After that, let's create the CORS configuration bin in a class called CORS properties. Let's annotate it with at configuration. And so this bin will be public CORS configuration, and we will return a new CORS configuration. Let's annotate it with bin, and let's add the configuration property with the prefix application.cause. We will ignore unknown field, and that's all for this class. Let's go now to the resource and the application.yml. Here we are going to add the cause properties that we added before. So first the allowed origin. So in that case, it's going to be HTTP localhost 4200 because here it's the one that we will use for dev. And then the allow method we can put stars. Hello header is the same. Exposed header the same. Hello credential is on false. And the max age will be 3600. So this is the default parameter. Now let's go to the application-prod. Let's add the application parameter, cores, and the allowed origin. The allowed origin will be https Airbnb clone.codecake.fr. So don't put stars here because, and that's allowed origin like this, sorry. So don't put stars, especially on your prod configuration, because that's a bad practice. It means that anyone can access your API anytime. So just put the real one. If you need to put multiple address, you can do so by just separating them like this. Next, we are going to make some change of our O2 implementation. The idea here is that the implementation that we have right now is not very suitable when you host on two different domains. So I made some schema to explain you more. So what we have right now is the following. So first, the user will try to access the Angular frontend. He will navigate, and at some point, he will log in. When he will log in, the Angular frontend will redirect him to the Spring Boot backend. Okay, so this is the third step. On the fourth step, the Spring Boot backend will communicate the address and redirect the user to Auth0. Okay, so that's the fourth. Then, if the login is successful, Auth0 will issue an access token that will be received by the backend, and then the Spring Boot backend will create a session for the user. And then he can call the API whenever he wants. We can simplify a bit this flow, and also about what I was saying is it will be easier to host it in two different domains by putting our backend as a resource server. So how does it work? So first, the user here will access the Angular frontend. Here it's the same. Then at some point he will log in, but this time he will not log in to the backend, he will log in to Auth0 directly. Auth0 will then issue an access token, and with this access token, the user can call the API normally. Like this, there is no session, and we are stateless on that side. That's way easier than this one. So that's why we are going to switch the code a bit. First, let's go to the pom.xml and let's search for Spring Boot starter or the client. So this dependency, we can get rid of it. Then let's refresh the POM and let's go to security configuration. Let's here remove the login and let's remove the client as well. All right, let's try to compile the backend. So that's working. Okay, so let's quit it. Now let's make some change on the application.yml at the Octa properties. So we need to add here the audience. The audience will be the address of the API, because the audience is needed since now we are in resource server mode, and we will need to have the group claim, which is the namespace. So it will be codecake.fr/roles. This one is the namespace that we put the role inside. So inside the JWT, we put the roles of the user, and that's where it is. So like this, the library will extract on its own the roles. Also, in the application-prod, here we will redefine the properties Auth0 with the role landlord-id, and we will have an environment variable named auth0.role-landlord-id. Okay, this one was the ID of the role that is on the auth0 side. So that's all for the YAML configuration. So let's close this. And now let's go to the auth0, to the auth of resources, sorry. And we can get rid of the logout because now the logout will be handled by auth0 directly. We don't need the registration like this, and we don't need this bin as well. No need to inject this. All right, then let's go to the auth0 service. And here we are going to add a method where we will return a user info. And this method will allow us to get the user info from the API of auth0, because inside the access token, we don't have the information anymore. So the parameter would be JWT. We will use the auth API dot new builder. It will be a auth0 domain, client ID secret. Yes, it's just domain. And we will just do a build, not execute. A build like this. We create the local variable that we can name auth0 auth API. We will then try to return an auth API dot user info JWT token dot get token value dot execute dot get body. Let's add a catch with the auth0 exception, and let's throw a new user exception. Let's copy this one. Let's copy this, and let's say not possible to fetch the user information. So let's input the JWT token with the get token value. Like this, we'll be able to investigate properly. All right, now let's go to the user service and let's modify this service a bit. So that's not the one. User service. Okay, so here the principal is not the auth0 user anymore, it's just a JWT. Okay, let me just check the right import. So here we will cast it as a JWT, and now we will need to inject the auth0 service. So let's add it in the constructor, and let's call the service. So user info auth0 service dot get user info dot, and we pass as parameter the principal. And as the parameter of the map or to attribute to user, instead of the principal, we are going to pass as parameter the user info dot get value. And the get value is exactly the same as the get attributes. It's already a map of string of objects. So that's perfect. We don't need to change the signature of this method. Here, we will need to change as well this method. So let's do it now. Like this, we stay on the same flow. So we don't need the given name. We just need to have the nickname. There is no family name, and the email is inside name. So let's transform this and let's get rid of this. So let's reduce this. Like this, we see better. And we are good to go. Let's go back to our user service. And for the sync with IDP, we also need to make some change because it's not auth0 user anymore. So it's a JWT as well. So let's call it JWT token. Here, let's call user info as well with the JWT token. Let's extract the user info and let's create a local variable here like we did. And let's modify the instant line here. It's going to be instant.parse, and it's not an integer anymore. Now it's a string. So we are going to do a toString. And that's all for the user service. Let's just have a look at the auth resource. So the auth resource here, it's going to be the same. Here, GWT token. All right, let's try to see if everything is compiling and starting properly. So it's starting properly. So that's good news. Let's stop it. And we are good to go for this part. The last configuration that we will need will be about HTTPS. So the idea here, as you can see on this schema, is that we will have traffic, which will be our reverse proxy, and that will handle all the incoming HTTP requests from the user. Okay, it will also hold the SSL certificate, and so it will be responsible of taking care of SSL. It also means that the Spring Boot and the Angular app will not know that we will be in HTTPS. So we need a way to say it to the web service and to Angular. So for Spring Boot, how will we do it? We can do it with two headers that will be forwarded from traffic to Spring Boot. These two headers can be configured as follow. So let's add the server dot, sorry for that. I want to put it here. So it's server Tomcat remote IP protocol header, and the protocol header will be X forwarded proto. This header will be filled with either HTTP or HTTPS, like this Spring Boot will know in which mode we are. And we will also need a remote IP header, which will be the IP address of the user that makes the request and not the one of the reverse proxy. This can be very useful for various reasons if you want to make analytics, logging, and stuff like this. Also here we have server Tomcat because we are using as default Tomcat. So if you are using Undertow or something else, you will need to change this configuration accordingly. Now let's go as well on our security configuration, and we will need to force and to make sure that we are in HTTPS before accepting request. So let's say we need to know which profile is active on Spring Boot. So we are going to add the Spring profile.active because we doesn't want to do that in development mode. We just want to do that in prod mode. Here, after we will do an if active profile equals prod, then we will configure the HTTP security to requires channel, so channel and channel.anyrequest.require_secure. All right, let's just make sure that everything is still working, even though we didn't really change things much in this mode. All right, so because we finished the configuration, now we can build once again the Docker image. And let's push the Docker image. I didn't increment the version, but that's okay. We just erase the 0.0.1. Let's now switch to the front end. So I invite you to git clone the front end project. You can find the URL in the description. On my side, I have already opened it on IntelliJ. Let's start. So first, what we need to do is to open the angular.json, and we are going to need to raise the budget to 2 megabytes because right now the bundle is bigger than 1 megabyte, so the Angular CLI will refuse to build it. By the way, tell me if you would be interested to see a video on how we can optimize the bundle like this. But now it's not really the topic of the video, so let's raise it. Now, let's switch the implementation of the SSO to match what we did on the backend. So, first, we are going to add the auth0 library inside our package.json. So npm I at auth0 slash auth0 dash angular. All right, it's here. Now let's add some key on the environment variable. Environment, exactly. We are going to need a const that will be the new backend URL. The backend URL will be as follow. So it will be 8080 localhost without the slash API. Then we are going to need the backend URL, the API URL as well. We will need the auth0 client ID. So let's put some random number here and the auth0 domain. So for me, my domain is this one. So airbnb-clone.us.auth0.com. Let's copy this on the development mode, except that my client ID is going to be this one. So for you, it will be different, of course. So you can find your client ID by going here on application. You select your app here. So for me, it's Airbnb clone. And here you have the client ID. So that's what you need to copy paste. I'm also going to create a environment.production to change those values on the fly. So the address will be https://airbnb clone.codecake.fr. The client ID is going to be this, and the hot domain is going to be the same. Since I added this, I need to go to the angular.json, and I need to add a file replacement like this on the build section. So let's find it in the build. So it should be on the configuration of the prod, and it should be production. Nice. Now let's go to the app config because we have some configuration to make. Let's add the auth0 provider and let's configure it. So we need the domain. The domain is going to be environment.auth0 domain. Let's import it. So why? Okay, we need a client ID and we need the authorization params with the redirect URI, which going to be window.location.origin. We need the audience as well. The audience is the address of the API. So the address of the API is /API/v2, and we need a scope. The scope is OpenID profile and read current user. Let's put a comma here. Let's get rid of this. And let's go now to refactor the auth service. First, the login method. We are going to now use the auth0 service, and we will call the login with redirect. Let's inject this service. So here, let's be careful because our service is named the same. So here we are going to import. Let's import auth0 service and let's put it some aliases because we will have some issue later. So here it's not new, it's inject, and let's inject it. So make sure that you have the right import here because it will not work. It will collide with the auth service already here. So once you inject it, here you should have this method that is good. Now we will need a renew access token because at some point we will want to refresh it. So this method is going to return void, and we will use the auth0 service dot get access token silently with the cache mod auth off, and we subscribe to it. So it will return the token, and with the token we will populate the access token variable with the token that we just received. Let's create this attribute here. So the access token can be a string or undefined. And we will call then fetch user. So fetch with true. Then we will need an init authentication method, and this method will be here to directly when the app is initializing, we will check if the user is already authenticated. And if he is, then we are going to ask Auth0 to give us a token. If it's not, then we don't do anything. So let's call once again the Auth0 service. And we have a Boolean is authenticated. Let's do a pipe. And on this pipe, we are going to filter only if, so let's import the filter, and if is logged in, then we are going to switch map and to call directly the get token silently method, and then we subscribe to it, and we populate the access token field with the token that we just received, and we call fetch, but this time we don't force the resync. Here the logout, we can change it, and we can just call simply auth0 service.logout, and that's all. Let's just call now these two methods at the right place. So first, let's go on the app component, and on the ng init, let's call the auth0. So yes, we don't have it, so let's inject it, auth0 service, and yeah, that's true that it's the auth service, not the auth0 service. And let's call the init authentication method. So that's not the good import. All right, let's put some semicolon here. Let's go to the properties create component at this line. Here, if you recall it during the tutorial, it's when the user is creating his house. So it means that it will become a landlord. So on the backend side, we had to add the role to this user, and we were doing it by calling the API of Auth0 and to add the role to it. Okay, so the issue here is that we had to refresh the token in order to know the new role. So that's why we were fetching and we will forcing the resync. But now it's not going to work like this because the access token will not be renewed by the backend. So what we will do here, we will call the method on the auth service. So, okay, so it's user service. So here, let's rename it. And we just renew the access token when we are creating the house for him. Also, on the navbar component, we don't need to fetch the user info anymore because it's done already at if he's logged in. So we don't need that. Then also we will need to have an interceptor to add the token. Every time we are calling here the backend, we need to send the access token. So we need an interceptor to do that. So let's go to core auth, and here let's create a TypeScript file named http-auth-interceptor. Let's create the interceptor, so it will be export const auth interceptor of type http interceptor function equals request and next, and inside we will have an auth service equals inject. So we are going to inject the auth service. Then we are going to extract the token from this service. And if there is a token, then we are going to clone the HTTP request and put the authorization header with the bearer keyword and the token that we extracted here. So it's not exactly access token, it's not get token, sorry, it's access token. And what's the problem here? It's that anyway, we need to do a return next and with the request inside. Also, in the app config, we need to add it. So it's going to be, we can get rid of the auth expired and we can add the auth interceptor. So two more things that we need to do before we will be able to start building our VM. First, let's go to the country service because there is something that we need to change. Here, it's going to be the address. It's not the API address, it's the environment, it's the backend directly. That's the backend URL. Then on the location map component, there will be an issue with the marker and the way they are loaded. So we are going to make sure it's going to work and be loaded well. So how should we do that? We are going to add here the name of the icons.default.prototype.options. Then icon URL, it's going to be assets and marker dash icon.png. Then let's copy paste this. It's going to be icon retina URL dash 2x and shadow URL and marker.shadow. So yeah, this is wrong, I think here, and that's because it's this way. Yes, it's inside the parenthesis. And last thing, we need to go to the angular.json to add those assets. So this one is going to be, so architect builder, so assets, and here we are going to do like glob like this, then input node module leaflet dist image, and then output will be on assets. So we do that to avoid that, because Angular, if I'm not mistaken, it will like put some unique ID, and by doing that, leaflet will keep track and will know which image it needs to load, even though there is the unique identifier. So now that we have all the configuration, we can try to launch our server, and we can try as well to launch our backend to make sure it's working as well and that is working properly on local first. So first we had a cause issue here. So you can't see it anymore, but here in the backend, we need to, so in the security configuration.java, we need to add here cars dot, and here we need to put customizer dot with default. Like this, you should, at least if you don't have anything in your database, you should see as well, there is nothing found in the listing. So let's see, and it's working. Now let's try to log in. So let's go back to our front end. Let me just put it a little bit bigger like this, you can see. So here we autocomplete in a wrong way. So it's redirect URI in this way, redirect dash URI. Let's retry. And this time it's fine. I'm finally logged in. One thing that I didn't mention is that we need to tweak as well on Auth0 side. We need to go to application, and if you made the tutorial until the end, normally you should like change here if you go to credential. So by default, you should have the client secret post activated in this way, but you need to put it at none, because before the backend needed a client secret to authenticate, but now it's the front end, and so on the front end, we don't have any client secret anymore. So you should click on none and then on save. And basically, you need as well to check if here you have the hallowed callback URL as localhost 4200, here the logout and the hallowed web origin as well. I advise you to put cause for localhost as well here, but this is the app for dev, so we will see a bit later for the prod one. So with this configuration, you should be good to go to make it work. Let's now validate that the flow is still working. So let's say that I want to create a new home. I want to create it in France, so the marker here is working. Then I add a guest. I add some pictures, some title, price, and the listing has been created successfully. So that's a good news. All right, I can also log out. Let's try. Yeah, it's working. And if I log in again, then let's see what happened. All right, it's working properly. Now that we are done with the front-end part, don't forget that you need to have a working Git repository, because we will need it for later when we will deploy to Coolify. It will be very important, so don't forget to commit and to push all your code to a working repository. So we can now switch to the setup of Coolify. So to do so, we will need a VM. So on my side, I'm on Azure, as you can see here, but you can go anywhere you want. And so that's why we're not going to do any tutorial on how to create a VM on Azure. That's not like the point of this video. You can take a VM wherever you want, on AWS, Hostinger, Hetzner. The only things that you need right now is a valid SSH connection somewhere. By the way, you can use Azure if you want, because there is a free tier if you are creating a new account. Like this, the VM will be for free for, I don't remember exactly how long, but it will be enough to make this tutorial. So once you have your SSH connection on your VPS, you can go to the website of Coolify, okay? Click on self-hosted and copy paste this this command line. Then we copy paste it. We just add here sudo because we need to run it, and we wait. On my VPS, Coolify is already installed and set up. So you will need to get through a bit of the setup at the beginning, but it's very simple. You just need to follow the tutorial. So once the setup is done, you click on this, and here you will see, and it will ask you to create a user, and you can follow the tutorial. Once this is done, you will arrive on this dashboard, okay? The first thing that we need to do is to map the VPS IP with a nice domain. Like this, we will have HTTPS. So let's go to settings. Here you will input the domain that you want to map. You click on save. And on the other side, you're going to go on your domain provider and you will add an A entry with the subdomain that you input on Coolify side and with the IP of your VPS, okay? Don't forget to put a small TTL because like this, you will not wait a lot for the DNS to propagate. Once this is done, you should be able to access Coolify with your domain and stop using this way because that's really not good. Now we are going to link your GitHub with Coolify. Let's go to source. You will click on add. Okay, you will give it a name. And here, so you can leave it empty if it's just a GitHub user, or if it's an organization, you can put the name of this. Once you can click on continue. Okay, here you will need to specify the webhook endpoint. So prefer to choose the domain name, okay, and not choose this because you will have the same issue with the HTTP. Then you click on register now, it will redirect, and then you can confirm the access as you will normally do when you need to connect with GitHub. So I'm not going to do it because it's already configured for me, but you should have something like this when you click on the integration, and you should be able to click, for example, on refetch to make sure Coolify has access to your GitHub. All right, now let's create a new project, okay? So the project will be Airbnb clone. We have only one environment. We are going to add a new resource. And first, we are going to set up Postgres. So my Postgres will be named pg Airbnb clone. Okay, so I'm going to let it everything by default. I'm going to save and I can click on start. What I can do directly is make it publicly available. So let's put 5432. Let's save. Okay, I just needed to change the port. So let's connect to it. And what we will do is we are going to create the schema. So let's go in IntelliJ. Let's create a new Postgres connection. Let's call it name pg tuto qualify j. The host is going to be my IP address. The port is going to be 5431. The user is going to be this. Just make it a bit bigger. Okay, sorry for that. This is the password. So the username is Postgres and the password is this. Let's try to test the connection. So I think it was just because my instance didn't like boot properly. So to make sure that everything is good, you should have like the database system is ready to accept connection. Okay, so I recreate it, and then this time I put the public port as 5432. Okay, so now the connection is okay, so I can apply and I can display all the schema, and I can create a new schema that would be Airbnb. What was the exact name? It should be Airbnb-clone. All right. For now, we will like let it make it available publicly, but once everything will be done, we will deactivate this because the connection with the backend and the database will be internal only, not in public. So I advise you to not, if you can, not make it publicly available. So of course, if you need to connect to it, it's easier like this, but just deactivate it when you can. Now let's create the backend. So let's go back to production and let's create a new existing Docker image. The image name is going to be this one. So not the tag, let's save. Okay, this one will be named Airbnb clone backend. The domain is going to be airbnb-clone-backend.codecake.f4. Let's save. So it's not latest, it's 0.0.1. The port exposed will be the 8080. Then we are going to configure traffic, so the reverse proxy, to be compatible with CORS. We are going to add here traffic.http.middleware.cors.headers.access control allow origin list equals to domain name that we input here. I forgot the HTTPS. All right. I will need as well, so some others. So let's some others parameter. This one will be headers. It's going to be access control allow. So that's very, very error prone. Allow header. Then it's expose headers. Then access control allow credential equals false. And we can save. So what's good with all of this and about traffic is that, and with KDE as well, is that we will have the HTTP SSL and the certificate that will be generated for us. And it's going to be legit because it's coming from Let's Encrypt. So that's very, very good. We don't have to care about that. Then in terms of environment variable, we need to have, so the Postgres DB, which is going to be Postgres, then the password, who is here, then the username, Postgres, then the URL, Postgres URL. So this is the internal name. We will need the Spring profile actives to control the profile that we want. So it's going to be production. Just prod. Then the Auth0 client ID. So this one here, we are going to create a new application. It's going to be Airbnb clone YouTube. It's going to be single page apps. Continue. Okay. On settings, the allowed callback URL will be https://airbnb clone codecake.fr. The logout URL will be the same, and the allowed web origin the same as well. In terms of course, we'll have this one and the Airbnb clone dash backend as well. And we can save change. the domain is the same, the client ID is not, and the client secret, so auth0 client secret. And we also need, so I can put that a bit bigger, I also need here the role, the ID of the role. So it's auth0 dash role dash landlord ID. All right, so I think I have everything I need. So now we can try to deploy. So let's click. Let's see how it goes. So it has been successfully updated. Let's go to the logs and let's see if the application is booting or no. So it seems not. So let's see why. So URL attribute is not specified. Oh, okay. So we have here, it's because it's dev. Okay, it's because there is a typo in the configuration. In enviable, it's without an S here. So let's update it and let's redeploy. So here, it's not Postgre username, it's Postgre user. Let's redeploy. All right, so it started successfully. Let me explain a bit. We had like a typo here, so we had to investigate it in the log. So here you have the deployment menu where when you have a new deployment, you will have the list here. And basically what is happening is that Coolify is pulling your Docker image and is trying to replace it with the last one. Once this is successful, you can go to the logs and these logs will be the container logs. Okay, so in that case, it's the Java process. So you can as well here manage the number of line that you want to see, and you can also stream, meaning that here, if you like tick this, it will automatically update. Okay, so that's very useful when you need to quickly debug something and that you want to have the logs. So now that we have the configuration and the backend running, do not forget here, you need to do the same as in your domain provider. So we need to link to the same IP address as the VPS, okay? So on my side, I'm going to do it. So it should look like something like this, okay? So you have the name and the IP address of your VPS. Now that the backend is configured properly, let's configure the frontend. So let's go back to production. Let's add a new resource. And this time we are going to add a private repository. So let's select Kotkay GitHub and I want the Airbnb clone frontend. Load repository. I will choose the branch deploy-coolify. Here I will choose Nixpack. So Nixpack is kind of the same as buildpack. So what it will do is that it will run on your project and it will try to detect what technology you're using. So what's good about this mode is that Nixpack will be run on Coolify. So it will rebuild everything on its own every time you're pushing some new change on Git. So we can tick like is a static site. The publish directory, the exact one is with Angular, it would be /list/ the name of your project /browser. And that's why we don't need to configure Docker like we did for the backend. So let's click on continue. Here, let's do https://airbnb-clone-codecake.fr. Let's save it and I'm going to add it on my side. So sorry for that. So let's add the record. Okay, let's save. Then we need to tweak a bit the configuration. So here the build command is going to be npm run build. The base directory, it's this. There is some watch path that we need to configure. So it's going to be the same. This is stars, and we have as well dash slash media slash star star. So this one will be for Nginx to let us access some subfolder with static assets, because we have slash media and we have slash assets. Let's save it. All right, and let's try to deploy it. So it can take a little bit of time. I mean, depending on the CPU and RAM that you have, if you have a powerful machine or no. All right, so normally now the project has been built and deployed. I forgot here to put a nice name. So let's say Airbnb Frontend, Airbnb clone Frontend. All right, and let's click on it and let's see. So first we can see that it's not too bad. So let's inspect it and let's see right now the API call failing. So first, in the environment production, in the front end, we have a misunderstanding here. It's Airbnb clone dash backend. So let's commit again. Let's push and let's rebuild the backend. Let's go on deployment and let's click on redeploy. All right, let's try again. Okay, so cause issue, and of course, because we didn't put the right address, so it's Airbnb-clone-backend. So let's rebuild the Docker image of the backend. Let's push it again. Let's come back to Coolify on the backend side and let's redeploy. Let's refresh. All right, so there was an issue with the generation of the SSL certificate. So what I did is I changed the address of the API of the backend. So I just name it Airbnb-API. And now if I go to the Airbnb clone address, I can see that no listing is found. It means that the API call went through. So let's now try to log in. Okay, so there is a call mismatch. So let's investigate on why it's not working. In your environment.production.ts here, there is a mismatch on my side. The client ID is not the same. So I'm going to commit again and push the modification. Now that the rebuild is done, let's try again. So let's refresh, let's log in. This time it's working, so I accept and I successfully logged in. Now let's make sure we can create some house. So next, let's choose some pictures. Let's do next. Let's put a price and it's finish. All right, so we have a success here and I was able to create my first house in the cloud. How cool is that? So I can still make like reservation. Nice. And I can log out as well. All right, so everything is working on that side. As our frontend is already automated by Coolify and Nixpack, we want to have the same with our backend. What we are going to do is to use Github Action to do so. Let's create a script to be able to build automatically and trigger Github Action. Let's create a directory.github. Inside this one, let's create another directory named workflows. And then let's create a build.yml file. Let's add it. Let's name it build. We will deploy it. We will trigger it, on push for branch main and deploy -cloud with pull request as well of type open, synchronize, and reopen. Then let's declare the jobs. We will have build. The name will be build as well. We will run on Ubuntu latest. The steps will be dash uses action. So first we are going to do a git checkout. Then we are going to name setup JDK 21. Then we will use the action setup Java v4 with the distribution Temurin and the Java version 21. Then the name, the next things that we will do is that we will cache, so Maven packages. So why we want to do that? Because like this, the first time the build will download all the Maven package, it will cache it at the end. Like this, next time we will rebuild it, it will not download everything again. We will earn a lot of time. So we will use the action /cache v4 with the path will be our .m2 where the jar are. Then the key will be the runner OS -m2 for Maven, and we will hash the pom.xml. It's kind of clever because like this, if the pom.xml change, it means that our dependency change, so we need to invalidate the cache. As long as we don't touch the pom.xml, the cache will remain valid. The restore key, so this one is pretty standard. So that's it for the cache. Then we are going to build our application. We just call it build. We will use we will run maven clean spring boot build-image. Then we will get the pom version to be able to push the Docker image after. So we'll do a run, and with this run, we will echo exactly that. So we will create a version variable where we will call maven help evaluate expression equals project version -q -force stdout. So basically what it does is that it's going to pass the pom.xml and it will extract the project.version who is here. That's the project-version, sorry. And we will put it with the GitHub env. Like this, it's accessible for all the rest of the build. After this, we are going to log in to the Docker Hub. We will use Docker login action v3 with two different env variables. Here the Docker Hub username and the Docker Hub token. We will put them on GitHub after. So never put, of course, your username and token like this on clear on your repository. It's very easy to put it on GitHub later. Once we are logged into the Docker Hub, we can push to Docker Hub. So no need of the push action. We just need to do a run and call Docker push. So it's going to be Airbnb-clone-backend with the env.pom version. So here it needs to be as well pom version, like this it's clear. Then we are going to notify coolify by running the following command. So we will do a curl --request get, then $secrets.coolify webhook --header authorization bearer coolify-token. Like this, if the build is successful, then we are going to deploy again on Coolify. The only thing here is that for now, we cannot send the tag to it. So for now, I try to open an issue on Coolify to see if it's possible, but for now it's not. So we still need to update the version on Coolify. So we have our script. To summarize, what do? We check out first the code. Then we set up Java on the CI. Like this, we can build Java code. Then we set up the cache for Maven. Then we build the entire application and with the Docker image. Then we get the POM version. After that, we log in to the Docker Hub, and then we push the image to the Docker Hub. At the end, we notify Coolify of the newly available Docker image. We can now commit this image. So let's commit this. So now you will need to go to your GitHub repository, go to settings, then go to secrets and variable, click on action, and now we are going to add the secrets. So let's do new repository secrets. Here we will need first the Docker Hub username. This one will be mine. So let's make sure. So add secret. Then the Docker Hub token. So for this one, you can go to your account setting, and then you can go to personal token. Then you can see how much token you have. Then let's add the Coolify token. So for this, you go to Coolify, you go to key and token, you go to API token, you put a description here, so Github Action Airbnb codecake. Okay, you untick this because you need like admin access. You create a token and then you copy paste it directly to Github Action. Then let's do the same for the webhook, and the webhook will be located. So you need to go on Project, Production, Airbnb Clone Backend, and the webhook will be in the corresponding menu. All right, now we have the 4, we should be good. So let's just be careful with the name of the branch. It should be the same as the branch of where you are. So if you're on main, it's main. If you're on deploy-coolify, it should be deploy-coolify. Here, there is just one thing that we are missing, is that for now, we will skip test. So let's commit this again. Let's push. And now we can go to action and we can check the build, how it's going to happen. Our build is passed, so we can see that the image has been pushed successfully. If we want to make sure, we can go to the POM and increment the version like this. We can push, so let's commit push, and let's check on the Docker Hub, and we should see a 0.0.2 soon. Let's go back to action. All right, let's check here. Let's refresh. And we can see that a few seconds ago, it has been pushed. Great, great, very nice. And congrats if you successfully push automatically the image with GitHub Action. If you want that I make tutorial for other platforms like AWS or Azure, drop a comment to let me know. I hope this tutorial was useful for you. Don't forget to subscribe to see my next video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.